It says you're alive. I wonder if that's true. Well, I hope everything's good tonight. I hope you can hear me. I've been having a little audio snafu, technical problems here. But welcome to the live. And I decided to do this live because I know some people, they want a little extra in terms of, the learning stuff and stuff I do. So let me know if you like it. And you can give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. We're gaining subscribers at a really fast clip here. I'm not complaining. It's just, I'm really honored by all the support I've been getting from the channel. So if you do love the content, be sure to like and subscribe. And there are a lot of ways that you can support the channel as well too. But you know what? If you're just along here for the ride, then not a problem. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about public service, about amateur radio service component, because it is part of the fundamental basis and purpose, as I'll explain. But first, let me explain what this show is going to be about. So I normally have the Thursday show with Kat Dixie DX, and that's fun and that's teaching her and stuff like that. But I know some people, they want something where we go kind of one-on-one. So I'm doing that to you. Still gonna be uploading videos and stuff. But we're going to try this Sunday night. If you think Sunday is too much of a problem, let me know. We could probably do another night. But I think I did conduct a couple polls and people said Sunday was the best night for them. I'll explain about the thumbnail. So the shirt. And I need to show you guys this who haven't seen it. But okay. I'm going to bring it up in Adobe Photoshop because that's what I use. And it's really really interesting here. So this here, the shirt, the famous shirt. You know who I have to blame for this? WP3R Otis from Puerto Rico. And Otis, he this shirt actually came about because when they had all the power problems in Puerto Rico, because their power grid has seen a lot of neglect, and for various reasons, right? Their power grid has been terrible, but they a lot of people seem unconcerned, about how their power grid was suffering, and that ties into our public service and disaster communications theme, by the way. So on CQ Contest, which is a contest email list that we talk about contests and stuff. A lot of Puerto Rico hams were sending 5990 in one of the ARRL contests. I think it was ARRL DX, and they were sending on ARRL DX CW. I was in that contest, and then I explained. I said, look, they don't have power, and people were saying, oh, I don't have to worry about Puerto Rico and all sorts of other nonsense. I said, you know what? If you're in their shoes, they don't care about your contest. They care that they don't have electricity and water and such like that. So give them a break. And a few weeks later, in the mail at PO Box 73, which is my postal box. If you want to send anything, you want to send a QSL card, send it to PO Box 73, Sussex, New Jersey. It's in QRZ. But he sent me this, and I was pleasantly surprised and came with a little note. He said, thank you for understanding what we meant. So you see the shirt, it has a light bulb with a Ghostbusters symbol. And it basically means that, they had no power. So that is the whole theme of tonight. We're talking about disaster comms, and I have a special guest here who wants to tell me good night. Good night. You have school tomorrow, buddy. There you go. Good night. All right. Good evening there, Mel. And good evening to everybody else who's watching. Don't be shy. Come in the comments. Not comments, but the live chat, and tell me what's going on, what you want to, to learn about. Okay. So that's the thumbnail. Now let's get to tonight's little thing. All right. So let me remove that from the screen. I normally use OBS for live streaming, but to be honest, I got lazy and I used StreamYard. I think all these ham radio YouTubers are using StreamYard. Okay, so tonight we're talking about Public Service 101. And the first thing I want to tell you is that, hey, Nicholas, N4BUT, and also Mel, KC2FKW. And so, public service. As long as the amateur service pretty much existed, radio amateurs have played a part in public service. And it became so readily apparent that amateurs were, you know, our role in society in helping out in times of need was so important that the FCC basically codified this into our basis and purpose. So if you see the basis and purpose, it says 97.1, the rules and regulations in this part are designed to provide an amateur radio service having a fundamental purpose as expressed in the following principles. A. Recognition and enhancement of the value of the amateur service to the public as a voluntary, non-commercial communication service, particularly with respect to providing emergency communications. Of course, the rest is about, the radio art, advancing skills, and then having an existing pool of trained operators and continuation of the unique ability. Well, it's probably not so unique anymore, but it actually, I think, the way that radio amateurs and others who engage in worldwide communications carry about themselves, I think amateur radio has a lot of good things going for it. So we have that recognition and enhancement of the value of the amateur service as a voluntary non-commercial communication service. We provide emergency communications. And as I'll explain, it's not just when all else fails. Okay, I realize that a lot of people know me from the ARRL, and that's great. I think that when all else fails is not the be-all and end-all. It's one of the things, but it's not, overriding. I think we provide a lot more than that. All right. So I think the biggest player in the room, ARRL, Aries, and a lot of people have opinions about Aries. So by the way, we're talking about who are the MCOM organizations in amateur radio. You have Aries, the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. They're part of ARRL, but you don't necessarily have to be an ARRL member to be part of Aries. You can be, in your own, you can not be a member of the ARRL and take part in Aries. I encourage everybody to be members of the ARRL. I understand some people don't want to be members of the ARRL. I'm hoping I could convert you sometime. But at the same time, I still love you just as much. So anyway, Aries, they are basically part of the ARRL. They're part of the ARRL field organization. So the field organization is where you have like the ARRL volunteers who are in an organized organization out in, the boots on the ground basically. And the head of each section, so the ARRL is divided into 76 sections. And sections usually mostly follow state boundaries, although there are a few notable exceptions. One of them, of course, being Florida, where you have, Florida just has so many radio amateurs. It's hard to put all of them in one section. New York and New Jersey, it's obvious. Right here, we have so much population. I mean, you have New York City, Long Island. In my role in ARRL, I'm in charge of New York City, Long Island, Northern New Jersey, and Eastern New York. So those three sections. I'm not a section manager, by the way. I'm a division director, right? Just so we get that clear. But the section managers that work with me, they are, for those three sections. Within the sections, you have the section emergency coordinators. And these are the people who basically oversee the local emergency communications relationships. And, they basically run the Aries program in those sections, right? And it's kind of like they basically they provide like some sort of management, but in reality they're there to help. I don't generally see them as being like, how should I put it? Although they do have a lot of power to make appointments and revoke appointments and such like that, they're mainly there to support local clubs and local areas groups. So they're there. Then in each district, you have the district emergency coordinator. That could be like a city. It could be like, an area. It could be like a town. One time I was in New York City district, and we had a district emergency coordinator who was appointed by the section emergency coordinator. And this person was responsible for all MCOM in that particular, in the city. And the city is complex, as I'll explain. But so that's how it is. And then, within that, you have the relationships formed with these various agencies. So anyway, that's Aries, right? And Aries basically is the ARRL. Now, you have this other one, RACES. So RACES is an official arm of civil defense. They were actually formed, basically for civil defense needs. They tend to be a little more restrictive when RACES has nets and stuff. You guys know what a net is, right? For those who don't know what a net is basically a round table of radio amateurs talking or sending Morse code, or they have Morse code nets, believe it or not, or digital nets, where they would take turns talking and they're directed by a person or a couple people, net controller, who would direct people to talk, and that's a directed net. So RACES has that. There are disadvantages and advantages of being associated with RACES. The advantage is that you get a lot of support in some areas from the local town, from the local county, etc. Some of them, they maintain vehicles and trailers and all sorts of MCOM infrastructure, repeaters and such like that. So a lot of groups find it beneficial to associate themselves with RACES because they get a lot of government support, and that's good. And they have a tight relationship with the government. The downside to that is you're basically, run by the agency, by the city and town. It could involve politics, and sometimes it's a good relationship might go south. But most times I've seen RACES groups thrive, so they're usually good. And there's kind of a federal support for these programs, as I'll explain in a moment. So here we're getting a little more into it. So there is actually shares is a concept of CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. It's kind of like a hierarchy of how we use HF frequencies for emergency and disaster response. So that is part of it. I mean, and there are a number of different post 9/11, right? 9/11 changed the world in terms of MCOM, and frankly, 9/11 changed the world in a lot of things. I came to the United States prior to 9/11, and I got to see it. I got to see it close up in New York City, and then beyond that, it just things just really we really became a different country back then, and now, right? Oxcom, is kind of like, I see they're adopting the RACES logo. That seems to be another type of organization that has some government affiliation as well too. I'll be honest, I don't have too many experience with Oxcom, so I can't tell you. I know a lot of people do that, but it's kind of taken root in some places now, and it's a new and upcoming thing, I believe. It probably was around for a while, but it's now it's getting a little more traction. See, I got my Tesla juice here. It's water. Okay. All right. Mars. So many of you probably heard about Mars, right? And Mars is the military affiliate radio system. And Mars has been around a long time. Now, let's step back a minute. The military and ham radio has had a lot in common. And then the military and amateur radio basically worked hand in hand for a long time. When amateur radio was first banned by the government, basically they ordered all radio amateurs off the air. A lot of radio amateurs went and they served with the military. They became, they were in support roles. They're radio men, and a lot of them basically did their radio craft for the military, to win the wars, right? But, Mars is kind of like this organization that's been around a long time supporting the military. It was made up of military members and also ham radio operators who are civilians too. Today, I believe you have around, I think, might be like 5,000 or so Mars members. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. If anybody's involved in Mars. I have a friend who actually is in Mars. So, Mars, Mars, interesting thing about Mars is that Mars really doesn't use amateur frequencies. Mars, you actually have to modify your radio. And by that you mean you go inside the radio, you take a soldering iron. See, I say it properly now, soldering iron. And you unsolder a jumper and it opens up the radio. Or in the case of a flex radio, which I have, they send you a file called a turf file, which actually will open up the radio transmit on the Mars frequencies, which just happen to be outside the amateur bands. So, Mars has served a number of different things. Today they do disaster response. Today they do emergency communications. Mars does a lot of digital communication too. Back in the day, Mars actually helped a lot of soldiers, a lot of deployed service members overseas call home. And that was a very important support function. I have family in the military and I have family who's been on deployment, and they will tell you that when you're overseas and you don't see your family, a very welcome thing to call home. And today we have the internet, today we have satellites, today we have all sorts of fancy communications. Back in the old days, you had HF radio and you had Mars. And Mars ran basically what you call phone patches, where you connect your HF radio to the telephone network and you were able to then make phone calls. And this was a very valuable service. Of course, today the Mars mission has changed a lot. You find a lot of Mars, of course, doesn't do that anymore because, let's face it, everybody has satellite. And, a lot of people, even frankly overseas, in Iraq or wherever, you get a SIM card and you call home, because they had cell phone networks. It's a good mission back then. You go back to a more romantic time, I guess. But today Mars is involved in a lot of disaster communication. They have nets to maintain readiness and such. And like I mentioned, Mars does digital communication. I believe they use Pactor. I think they might be using some flavor of WinLink, so they pass messages digitally rather than just HF SSB, but they do have HS SSB nets. And Mars is a very, it's a very interesting program to be involved in. All right. And so, hey, you know what? We have viewers outside all over the world. Canada, I think, has its own Aries. The UK has something called Raynet. I don't know how active Raynet is. In Trinidad, we had something called AIRS, the Emergency Amateur Radio Service. And then you have in Australia and New Zealand. You probably want to ask Hayden, VK7HH from Ham Radio DX, more about that part of the world. But other parts of the world, the long story short is they rely on amateur radio probably a little more than we do, because I'll tell you, in the Caribbean, our communications infrastructure would whenever a hurricane or anything came through, man, we'd gotten flattened. So, and I have one of my 9 Yankee friends here, Nigel 9Z4EJ, which I actually showed in one of my Club Trinidad and Tobago presentations. And I might be showing that on Live with Ria sometime. So, yeah. So, they have, like, especially hurricane season, not so much Trinidad, but a lot of the other islands north of us, they were in the prime hurricane belt. And when they got a hurricane, they would get flattened. So we would have a relationship with a Caribbean disaster organization called CIDERA. And then we would go up the islands and help them out with radios. We'd keep in touch and help them get the disaster relief. You have Haiti with the earthquakes and such. Haiti, it's just tragic what Haiti had to go through when they had all these earthquakes. They really, they lost everything, and they already lost everything, So a lot of this stuff goes around the world. All right. And in the United States here, so back here for a minute, who are we serving? We're serving the FEMA, right? So FEMA is like on a federal level, right? So, here in the States, we have different things. We have federal level, we have state level, then we have city, county, municipal, that kind of thing in that, well, not in that order, but all agencies, everything starts with federal support. And one thing I learned in a CERT class one time was that the disaster declarations that you see, a lot of politicians get criticized for declaring a state of emergency. They do that for a reason, which is to secure the funding and to secure the resources. So, I don't blame them because I know, but it's easy for people to take shots and say, hey, they're declaring an emergency for nothing. But this helps with readiness. So FEMA, we have a MOU, memorandum of understanding with FEMA. We actually work with them on various things. We meaning, ham radio operators and ARL and such like that. The Red Cross, the American Red Cross, is a big one. I actually did a number of Red Cross courses because I was involved in emergency communications, and it was it's kind of like required. In New York City, we had a great relationship with the Red Cross. Unfortunately, a lot of things change from time to time. The Salvation Army, they're interesting. I discovered what they actually were doing post 9/11. A lot of their work, they do help with disasters and such like that, right? Disaster relief. But they feed emergency workers. They have their canteen set up and they have food and water for first responders, and we help them coordinate that. And that's so cool. I really, thought that was so cool. And they have an organization called Saturn, Salvation Army Team Emergency Response Network. They're a faith-based organization, obviously, and they carry out their mission that way. So they're one of the agencies we serve. We have local governments as well that we serve, and of course, the local governments tie in with RACES. One time when I was actually serving on an ARES team, I was told that how ARES basically is an arm of CERT in that town. So CERT is Community Emergency Response Teams. They were created to provide sort of some local preparedness of people, trained volunteers who could help out in emergencies. And they integrated amateur radio in that because they figured, well, they would get people together and have more support that way. Hospitals. I have a friend who is heavily into that. Paul Beener, KD2DRM, and he's in Tri-County Amateur Radio Club. I believe he might have been president. Well, he was president. I don't know if he's still president. He's probably going to beat me up for that. But he works with Trinitas Regional Medical Center, and their hospital. And a lot of hospitals have actually taken to amateur radio as part of their, disaster preparedness. So hospitals now, they have amateur radio inside the hospitals, right? And they would get antennas put on the roof. They'd probably get some repeaters put up. And no, Jason, you're not first. Sorry. Yeah. But thanks for joining the first stream, though. But the hospitals really, they have some sort of like a special relationship with amateur radio, because some years ago, the hospitals were doing drills on a regular basis, right? So the hospitals had some requirement to have backup communications, and a lot of them, chose amateur radio. That was kind of controversial, especially for a for-profit hospital. But I think most hospitals are either non-profit, run by, religious organizations like the Catholic Church and Presbyterian Church and such like that. They basically run hospitals, but yeah, various nonprofits run hospitals too. So there was controversy that these hospitals were running emergency drills using amateur radio frequencies on a regular basis. That caught the attention of somebody. They complained to the FCC. And what the FCC did was the FCC said, well, okay, let's think about it. And eventually they rewrote the rules into Part 97, saying that how, okay, you can have your drill 1 hour, I think it's 1 hour a week or something. And, they put some stipulations in it, and the hospitals were able to do their drills. So, but hospitals do use amateur radio, and I think a lot of them actually, they work with local radio clubs, like Trinitas works with Tri-County Radio Club, Radio Association, and they get that done. And so there's a beneficial relationship there. They're not just, they don't just have ham radio sitting in a corner collecting dust. They actually have people helping with them. Right. What do we do? So, the actual things that we do, we have support during times of emergency. We help. We are the backup. We're not first responders. I think this is very important for people to understand. We're not going to be first on the scene. We're not going there blazing with lights and siren. Some radio amateurs do that. They're not supposed to. Some of them self-deploy. We're not supposed to. It's not good to do that, to be honest. But we are a good backup. Sometimes we're there long term, and then we provide emergency support. We help when things go down, and we're the backup. Logistical support, as I mentioned, it doesn't have to be with the Salvation Army in particular. It doesn't have to be that communications are down. It could be that they just need trained volunteers with radios to help with communications, and let them focus more on their stuff. Of course, a lot of times communications are down, so that helps, but a lot of times they're not. And like I mentioned, sometimes they're integrated with a CERT team or similar. It's not just emergencies, and I think this is kind of underappreciated. One of the major things I've done and that I've helped with is the New York City Marathon, right? And then the New York City Marathon is a huge event in New York City. Okay? It spans pretty much the 5 boroughs of New York City. And 5 boroughs meaning, New York City is comprised of 5 boroughs, right? Manhattan, Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and Richmond, Staten Island. So the New York City Marathon sprawls all those, and then we used to have various radio amateurs, probably still do, stationed at various mile points, and they had a group of them. You have the mile captain, you have the support person, a couple support people, you have the medical communicator, and then these people check into various organized nets, and it's very organized. My Elmer and good friend, Silent Key now, Steve Mendelson, W2ML, who is also an ex-Hudson Division Director for the ARRL, and former ARRL First Prize President. He wore a lot of hats, but his most important hat was that orange hat, which was the New York City Communications Director for the New York City Marathon. And it was amazing how they coordinated that event. I mean, they had radios basically citywide, and they right now there's a club that does it, and they basically do the marathon communications, but and they use some more modern technology, by the way. So back then we were using a lot of VHF radios. Let me find this picture for you. So here you have in the yeah, oh, paywall. Yeah, but anyway, I can still show you this. Steve, you'll see Steve here with his radio here, and let's see here. Chrome tab. I love this sharing this Chrome tab thing. This is really nice. Yeah. So this is Steve here. Steve. Well, this was probably a different run, but you have people, with these orange. This was kind of like the uniform of the New York City Marathon communicators, and you have like the runners going through there. So we'd be stationed at each mile. I think, and it was kind of an event for clubs. I mean, these local radio clubs would have a marathon team, and they would serve at the same mile point, and they basically get together, and they have the marathon. One of the clubs I was in, the Ramapo Mountain Amateur Radio Club, we had a marathon team, but I was different. I was actually in one interesting role I had was I work with interpreters, because you attract people from all over the world to do the marathon, and I used to have to basically talk with some of them, and like, for example, a runner from, I don't know, Kenya or some other place gets injured. They don't really speak English. They might speak French. And then we get them to talk on the radio, third-party traffic, to speak to the doctors. We have an interpreter. We had several different language interpreters. I worked with one who speak Croatian, and then the other languages. So they would then have the doctor talk to them and translate. That was pretty neat. Of course, today you have Google Translate and all that stuff, so that might be superfluous. But that was pretty neat what was done. Okay, let's see here. I see a couple more in the chats. Steve was pretty awesome. Steve actually brought me into NJDXA, North Jersey DX Association. So, Steve is one of a kind. Well, and then friend Chuck helps. Hey, good for him. I know Louisiana needs all the help, and they have a lot going on there. They have a lot going on there, especially now. Right. So, but yeah, I used to make a joke. I said we pretty much curing every single disease out there with ham radio, and it's kind of true. Various charity events. We have Bike MS. Bike MS is a big ham radio supported event in New York. So obviously they support the fight against multiple sclerosis. That was really nice. Okay. Moving on. I'm going to try my best not to name this global health crisis because, my video might get a little flag below it. It doesn't affect anything. It just looks, a little flag. But last year we had a situation, right? And we still have it this year. And I noticed a lot of radio clubs approached me about things they were doing. So a lot of us were at home. We were stuck in isolation. And, it was a very lonely time for a lot of people. Especially you have people who are, they're a little bit, maybe their relatives are out of town. Their kids moved out. They're older and such. So ham radio helped a lot of people with their mental health. And I think that was pretty cool. They had health and welfare nets, basically, that would be in the morning or evening when people would get together and talk about day's events, or say, hey, hi, how are you doing? Or share a nice story. and a lot of these were on local repeaters, some of them on HF. But ham radio saw an uptick of interest during that time. So that was a good thing at least, but it definitely helped keep people from becoming unglued. One more important thing is that ham radio helped people find supplies. A lot of these clubs had nets that said, you know what, you could buy toilet paper here. Well, why is it toilet paper? I don't know why, but I heard in some places Costco is running out of toilet paper again. I don't know why, but people find supplies and resources. Places had senior hours, first responder hours, and such like that. Health and welfare traffic. You want to make sure you do how everybody's doing. And that was a very important thing. I really appreciate that these clubs did that. It was, in more ways than one, it really helped amateur radio shine. And I'm all about helping amateur radio shine because it makes me look good. Okay, well, yeah, that's one thing. All right, let's see what else we got in comments here. Actually, I think my comments are stuck. Yeah, C19. Yeah, use coded language. Boredom breakers net. Yeah, I don't know. It might be kind of cool if they flag my video. It doesn't get demonetized. It just gets flagged. But all right. Next, moving on. So what do you need for this? Okay, what do you need? So there's always it's a trend in society today. I noticed that people don't want to tell you how much something costs until it's time for you to pay. And I don't know, but I'll tell you. You need to have time, obviously. You can be a little bit or lots, but I think generally you have to commit to time. I think for most people, these organizations for emergency communications usually have nets that run maybe like once a week or once a month, or with some degree of frequency. I think you should commit yourself to at least checking into the nets and helping out. Okay, well, not at least checking into nets. Okay, you need radios, of course. At the bare minimum, some of these groups said, well, you must have a VHF, UHF handheld, dual band because of the repeaters they use. It might be different in your area. Some areas only have VHF repeaters. Some areas might require you to have HF capability, but I've rarely seen those. Most of them use VHF and UHF. And generally, the local repeaters. Some clubs have like just one or two repeaters. Aries groups, races groups, etc. Of course, for these radios, you need an amateur radio license. There are a few of them that are using GMRS, and I've actually gotten some private emails and such that said, hey, GMRS is great because some people are actually using that in disaster response and public service events, and that's cool. But we're talking about amateur radio, Aries and races. You're going to need an amateur radio license. Training. Training is interesting, right? A lot of the training in emergency communications is not necessarily training on how to do ham radio, because you already have that, okay? You already have your license, you already know, and hopefully you have an Elmer to help you, or you're watching my videos, right? And I'm showing you how to do stuff. But a lot of the training has to deal, basically, I like to say, how do you deal with your served agencies, your clients? How do you deal with these people? Okay. A lot of the training I've done the FEMA courses, the IS 100, the 700, and a few others. And most of them has to do with the incident management system, NIMS, right? Incident Command System, ICS, where the government, again, post, 9/11, they instituted a lot of security things, and they also have now this NIMS, National Incident Management System, where they coordinate a lot of disaster response and emergencies and such. and they have like a standard now for interaction and interoperability, because remember, interoperability was a big thing. Okay, so interoperability is always a problem, but with the incident command system, they get everything, standardized to some degree. The ARRL has their own training, so let's go deeper into this training. So here you could see a sample. You could go on the FEMA website and look for the courses here. They're talking about all their things, but you take the courses online. There's some courses you have to go places to do it, but generally, most of what you need is online, so just do it online. I don't even know if they're taking anybody in person these days anymore. Here's an example of a certificate you'll get. This is for the ICS 100 Introduction to Incident Command System, and I took this online. I actually, I've been taking FEMA courses pretty much since 2001, and I basically have a whole bunch of them based on the the incident management system. They used to have another one, they call it IS 100. It was called IS 100 back in those days. But I took all sorts of things like radiological response. Yeah, like I would need that. But a lot of things that I took. And you know what? It was interesting. Generally, though, I think the bare minimum right now is the ICS 100 and the 700, and that will allow you to work with to volunteer with one of these local MCOM groups. Okay. Yeah, I took this in 2018. I don't think there's any refreshers. Okay. Yeah. But don't let it end there. Like I said, there are various specialized courses. Right? And there's a lot of stuff basically that you can do. So one thing I actually didn't mention, I didn't have here in these slides, but I'll mention anyway. Hams have been deeply involved in the Skywarn system. And Skywarn basically are citizen weather spotters that provide on-the-ground reports of hazardous weather and various weather conditions, river levels, and such like that. So, looking forward to see me land a top job at the FCC. I don't think so. But anyway, so Skywarn is a different thing. The Skywarn, I've noticed, is local. There's a lot of variation. Here in New Jersey, we actually I go through Mount Holly, which is, so it's interesting. The part of Jersey I live in is Northwest Jersey, and we're under Mount Holly, which is Philadelphia, whereas the Northeast Jersey is under New York, which is OKS. So, yeah, so anyway. All right, so let me see what the chat is saying here. So I recently posted a video on GMRS. That one's really smoking hot. I think a lot of people should look at it. But thanks for all the views on that one. Is there a set date as when the license fees are going to change, put into effect? Let me take my crystal ball. No. Okay, the answer is no. Unfortunately, what happened is the FCC apparently had some IT changes or something they're not telling us that they're doing. They need to implement this, and everything they've said is that they will give us at least 90 days notice. So it's almost October, and October, November, December, that would push us into next year. I'm thinking in the first quarter of 2022 is when you're going to see something. Okay? All right. But trust me, when it drops, okay? I and every other YouTuber is probably going to have a video. I think I'm going to start taking bets on who's going to have a video about that. I will probably have one. You know what? Thanks, but I enjoy what I do. I do IT. I do a lot of geeky stuff. I do drone flying. Drone flying is nice, by the way. I work with some people on some cool solar energy stuff and batteries. You know, so that's cool stuff. I don't know if that'll be compatible with me working at the FCC, right? Let's see. No refreshers recommended. That the class did change in 2013. Yeah, so that's why I took it in 2018. Exactly. I took it in 2018 precisely because it changed. And I had the old IS courses. In Trinidad they had the OWTU Marathon, a great race. Yeah, cool. I remember. You know, in Trinidad, one of the things we actually worked on emergencies was a water shortage. There was like some pipeline broke, and the local water company, they couldn't get it running again. So it took them a while, and the government basically dropped off water tanks in various towns to for people to go and fill up water, and they brought water by truck. And hams were there to report water levels. So yeah, Skywarn. You know, Skywarn's one of those things that if you're in a country, in a part of the country that experiences bad weather, you're gonna have a lot of use for Skywarn. And yeah, you and me both. Although, you know, I paid $70 for my GMRS license. I'm such a fool. But the thing is, some of the drone crews I work on, they have GMRS, and I need the license. So yeah. All right. Okay. Well, you know what? If there's anything else, I just, you know, it's Sunday night. I know people gotta go to work tomorrow, and like I said, life with Ria. It's gonna be. Let me know if you think when we should be doing this. I'm trying not to clash with others who have live streams around this time, but I'm gonna try to do this on Sunday because that's convenient for me, and that's also what the people said in the poll on Twitter, and we'll do that. So let's see here. I'm a new ham. I have a GMRS license. Um, does GMRS radios perform meaningfully better than similar? If you're talking about ham radio antennas, if you change a ham radio antenna to run GMRS, it might not be as efficient. So it's always better to get a dedicated antenna. So yeah, the answer is it's yes. It's always better to get a dedicated antenna for GMRS. Um, a dual band, the performance difference might not be appreciable enough to really make a big difference anyway. So all right, okay, all right, guys. Let me see if there's anything I missed here. And no, I think we're good. All right. So anyway, I have a few new videos coming up. I'm going to have reviews of those GMRS radios that you're going to see. And I have a cool little video I'm working on. And it basically has to do with energy, but it has a ham radio theme in it. And it's so cool. It's a little bit of an experiment I've been working on. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. And involves some interesting experiment. A1SU, hey, nice to see you. I think you've operated from Moose Island or something. I don't know. Section manager for Vermont. Nice to see you. All right. Good night, guys and gals and everybody else. 73. Keep on having. And to RJ. See you around.